Y'all, I never thought I'd be the kind of woman telling this story, but honey, when your own family treats you worse than a stray dog, and sometimes you got to do what you got to do. My name's Dorothy. I'm 74 years old, and I'm calling from Phoenix, Arizona, where the heat ain't got nothing on the fire that's been burning in my chest for the past 3 years. What I'm about to tell you is going to make your blood boil.
But sweetie, stick with me because the ending is sweeter than my late husband's peach cobbler. It started the day my Harold passed away. We'd been married 47 years, lived in the same house on Maple Street since 1978. Harold built that house with his own 2 hands, and honey, every nail, every board, every coat of paint was put there with love. But the minute that man drew his last breath, my son Marcus and his wife Jennifer swooped in like vultures circling roadkill. I'm telling you, Harold wasn't even cold in the ground before they were measuring rooms and making plans. Now, let me paint you a picture of this house, because it's important you understand what we're dealing with. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a beautiful kitchen with marble countertops that Harold surprised me with for our 40th anniversary, and a living room with the most comfortable sectional sofa you ever did see. Harold and I saved every penny for 20 years to buy that couch. It was our pride and joy, where we watched every Cowboys game, every Christmas morning, every grandkid's first steps on video calls. Marcus was our only child, and I'm going to be honest with you, honey, we spoiled that boy rotten. Harold worked double shifts at the copper mine so Marcus could go to college, and I took on 3 cleaning jobs to pay for his wedding when he married Jennifer. We gave him everything, and I mean everything. So when he showed up at the funeral with a bunch of legal papers telling me they were just trying to help me manage my affairs, I trusted him. Lord help me, I signed those papers without reading them proper. Before I tell you what happened next, and honey, this part is going to absolutely shock you. If you're loving this story, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell. You know I get so excited when I see y'all in the comments. What state are you calling home right now? Drop it down below. And sweetie, tell me honestly, have you ever had family make you feel invisible in your own home? Because your stories help me know I'm not alone in this crazy world. Now, let me tell you what I discovered, because what they did was about to backfire in the most beautiful way. Those papers I signed, they weren't just power of attorney like Marcus told me. That sneaky little weasel had me sign over half the house to him and Jennifer. Not only that, but they also had me agree to let them move in temporarily to help me through my grief. Temporarily, my foot. Within 2 weeks, they had packed up all their belongings and moved into my beautiful home, bringing their spoiled, rotten German Shepherd named Bruno with them. Now, I love dogs, don't get me wrong. Harold and I had 3 beautiful labs over the years, and we treated them like family. But Bruno wasn't just any dog. This animal was a monster, weighing close to 90 pounds, and Jennifer treated him like he was her firstborn child. That dog had his own memory foam bed, ate organic food that cost more than my weekly groceries, and got groomed every month at some fancy pet salon in Scottsdale, Arizona. The first sign of trouble came when Jennifer announced that Bruno was sensitive to disruption and needed the living room to be his safe space. Y'all, she looked me dead in the eye and told me I couldn't sit on my own couch anymore because it might upset the dog. I thought she was joking at first, but honey, I felt my voice caught with pure shock when I realized she was dead serious. Dorothy, and she always called me Dorothy, never Mom like a proper daughter-in-law should. Bruno has anxiety, and the vet says he needs a consistent environment. You understand, don't you? We're all making sacrifices here. Sacrifices? I was the one making sacrifices. I watched my own furniture get rearranged to accommodate that dog's needs. My beautiful china cabinet got moved to the basement because Bruno might knock it over. My piano, the one Harold bought me for our 25th anniversary, got pushed into the corner and covered with a sheet because the sound gave Bruno panic attacks. But the worst part, sweetie, the absolute worst part, came about a month after they moved in. I was having trouble sleeping in the master bedroom. Too many memories of Harold, you understand. I'd been spending most nights on that sectional sofa, wrapped in the quilt my mother made, watching late-night television and feeling close to my husband's memory. One evening, I came into the living room around 9 o'clock, ready to settle in for the night. And there was Bruno, sprawled across the entire sectional like he owned the place. All 6 cushions, honey. This dog was taking up space meant for 3 grown adults, and Jennifer was sitting on the floor next to him, feeding him treats and baby talking like he was an infant. "Excuse me," I said, my voice already starting to shake with indignation. "I need to sleep on the couch tonight." Jennifer looked up at me with those cold blue eyes of hers and said, "Oh, Dorothy, didn't Marcus tell you? Bruno has claimed the couch as his territory. The vet says moving him now could trigger his separation anxiety. We can't risk his emotional well-being." Y'all, I couldn't believe what I was hearing with my own 2 ears. "Where exactly am I supposed to sleep?" I asked, and honey, I could feel those tears threatening to spill over. "Well," Jennifer said, not even looking embarrassed, "Marcus set up a nice little area in the garage. It's got an air mattress and everything, very cozy." The garage. They wanted me to sleep in the garage while a dog took over my living room? The same garage where Harold used to work on his woodworking projects, where we stored Christmas decorations and old photo albums? They wanted me to sleep on an air mattress between paint cans and gardening tools while Bruno stretched out on furniture I'd been making payments on for 5 years. That night, lying on that deflating air mattress, listening to the garage door rattle every time the wind picked up, I let out the longest sigh you ever heard. I could hear Bruno barking at something on the television through the walls, and I swear I could hear Jennifer cooing at him like he was a baby. My own son, my own flesh and blood, thought it was perfectly reasonable for his 74-year-old mother to sleep in the garage while his dog lived better than most people. But honey, that was just the beginning of my nightmare. Over the next few weeks, the rules in my own house kept multiplying faster than rabbits in springtime. I couldn't use the kitchen before 10 o'clock in the morning because Bruno needed his quiet breakfast time. I couldn't watch television in the evening because it interfered with Bruno's bedtime routine. I couldn't have visitors because strangers made Bruno nervous and aggressive. When my sister Clara came to visit from Tucson, Jennifer actually had the nerve to suggest Clara stay at a hotel because Bruno didn't do well with new people in his space. His space? It was my house, my living room, my family, but somehow everything revolved around that overgrown flea bag's comfort. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in November. I had been sleeping in that garage for 6 weeks, and I was getting sick from the cold desert nights. My arthritis was flaring up something fierce, and I could barely get out of bed without my joints screaming in protest. I decided to make myself some hot tea and toast before anyone else was awake, thinking maybe I could have 5 minutes of peace in my own kitchen. I tiptoed through the side door that connected the garage to the laundry room, then quietly made my way to the kitchen. But when I flipped on the light, there was Bruno, standing on the kitchen counter with his dirty paws all over my clean surfaces, eating what looked like an entire rotisserie chicken that had been meant for dinner. "Bruno, get down," I whispered harshly, not wanting to wake the whole house, but needing to stop this destruction. That's when things went from bad to worse. Bruno looked at me with those dark eyes, showed his teeth, and let out the most menacing growl I ever heard from any animal. I'm talking about a sound that came from deep in his chest, a warning that made every hair on my arm stand up straight.
Then he did something that still gives me chills when I think about it. He took a step toward me, still growling, chicken grease dripping from his muzzle. Y'all, I backed out of that kitchen faster than a cat with its tail on fire. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought I might have a heart attack right there on my own tile floor. This dog, this animal that my family valued more than my safety and comfort, had just threatened me in my own home. But when I told Marcus and Jennifer what happened, they looked at me like I was making the whole thing up. "Mom, Bruno wouldn't hurt a fly," Marcus said, not even looking up from his phone. "You probably startled him. Dogs have natural protective instincts about their territory." Their territory. There it was again. My kitchen, my house, had become the dog's territory, and I was the intruder. Maybe you should be more careful about when you enter the common areas. Bruno's routine is very important for his emotional stability. That's when something inside me started to shift. Lying on that air mattress that night, I could feel anger building in my chest like a slow-burning fire. These people had taken my home, my comfort, my dignity, and were treating me like I was the problem. But honey, they had absolutely no idea what this old lady was about to do next. The next morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I got dressed, put on my best church outfit, and walked 3 blocks to the Phoenix Public Library. Now, I know what you're thinking. What's a 74-year-old woman gonna do at the library that could solve this mess? But sweetie, you'd be surprised what you can learn when you put your mind to it. I spent 4 hours researching Arizona property law, elder abuse statutes, and something called financial exploitation of vulnerable adults. Turns out when someone tricks an elderly person into signing legal documents without proper representation or full disclosure, that's called fraud. And when family members use their position of trust to take advantage of a grieving widow, well, that's got its own special category of illegal. But the most interesting thing I learned was about something called adverse possession and property rights. See, even though Marcus had tricked me into signing over half the house, I was still listed as the primary owner and had certain rights that couldn't be taken away without my explicit consent. I also learned about restraining orders, emotional abuse, and something called constructive eviction, which is when someone makes your living conditions so unbearable that you're forced to leave your own property. Every single thing Marcus and Jennifer had done to me fit the legal definition of elder abuse. And honey, I have been documenting everything in my journal without even realizing it. That evening, I came back to the house with a new sense of purpose. I walked into that living room where Bruno was sprawled across my sectional, watching Jennifer feed him pieces of my leftover pot roast, and I made an announcement. "I've retained a lawyer," I said, and you could hear the steel creeping into my voice. The look on their faces was pure gold. Marcus dropped his beer, and Jennifer's mouth fell open like a fish gasping for air. Bruno just kept chewing my pot roast, completely oblivious to the fact that his cushy lifestyle was about to come to a screeching halt. "What kind of lawyer?" Marcus asked, and I could hear the panic starting to edge his voice. "The kind that specializes in elder abuse and real estate fraud." And sweetie, I couldn't help but smile at the way Jennifer went pale as fresh snow. But that lawyer meeting was still 3 days away, and those 3 days were about to become the longest of my entire life. Because once Marcus and Jennifer realized I wasn't going to be their pushover anymore, they decided to make my life even more miserable. The very next morning, I woke up to find a padlock on the door between the garage and the laundry room. They had literally locked me out of my own house, leaving me to access the main building only through the front door, which they started keeping locked during the day for security reasons. They gave me a key, but they also installed a new deadbolt that I wasn't told the combination for. Mealtimes became a nightmare of passive-aggressive warfare. Jennifer would cook elaborate meals for Marcus and Bruno, but somehow there were never leftovers, and she'd make comments about how grocery bills were getting too expensive to feed extra people. Extra people? I was the homeowner, and she was calling me extra people in my kitchen. They started hosting loud parties that went until 2 in the morning, and when I complained about the noise, Marcus told me I could wear earplugs if I didn't like it. They moved my bedroom furniture out of the master bedroom and into the garage, claiming they needed more space for Bruno's toys and exercise equipment. But the final straw, the thing that pushed me over the edge into pure rage, was the night before my lawyer appointment. I came into the house around 8 o'clock to use the bathroom and get a glass of water, and I found Marcus and Jennifer hosting a dinner party. 8 people sitting around my dining room table, eating off of my good china, drinking wine from the glasses Harold and I got for our wedding. And there was Bruno sitting in my chair at the head of the table, wearing a little bow tie and eating prime rib off of one of my heirloom plates. Y'all, I stopped dead in my tracks and just stared. This dog was literally sitting at my dining room table like a guest of honor while I was sleeping in the garage and being treated like some kind of unwanted relative. The guests were laughing and taking pictures of Bruno dining with them, and Jennifer was cutting his meat into little pieces like he was a toddler. "Oh, Dorothy," Jennifer said when she noticed me standing in the doorway, "we're having a little dinner party for Bruno's birthday. Isn't he just precious in his little outfit?" A birthday party for a dog in my house, using my furniture and dishes while I was locked out in the garage like some kind of criminal? I need to speak with both of you privately. And honey, my voice was shaking with rage and humiliation. "Can't it wait?" Marcus asked. "We have guests." "Now," I said, and the tone of my voice must have gotten through to him because he actually got up from the table.
We went into the kitchen and I let them have it with both barrels. I told them exactly what I thought of their treatment, their disrespect, and their complete lack of human decency. I reminded them that this was my house, bought with my husband's pension and my hard-earned money, and that I was done being treated like a second-class citizen in my own home. "If you don't like the arrangement," Jennifer said, her mask of fake sweetness finally slipping away, "you're welcome to move to a senior facility. I'm sure there are plenty of nice nursing homes that would love to have you." A nursing home. She wanted to ship me off to a nursing home so she and Marcus could have complete control of my property and my life. And the way Marcus was nodding along with her suggestion made it clear this wasn't the first time they'd discussed it. "Over my dead body," I said, and sweetie, I meant every word. That night, lying on that deflating air mattress for what I promised myself would be the last time, I made a decision that would shock everyone, including myself. I was done playing defense. It was time to go on the offense. And honey, I had a plan that was going to knock their socks clean off. The next morning, instead of going to meet with the lawyer I'd mentioned, I drove across town to the most exclusive real estate office in Phoenix. I walked into Prestige Properties like I owned the place and asked to speak with their best agent about purchasing a home in the area. Now, you might be wondering how a woman sleeping in a garage could afford to buy another house. Well, sweetie, Harold and I weren't just any old retired couple. We'd been careful with money our whole lives, and Harold had a life insurance policy that would make your eyes pop. Plus, the house on Maple Street was worth nearly $400,000, and I owned half of it outright. But I had something even better than money. I had information. See, while I was researching property law at the library, I'd also looked up the tax records for our entire neighborhood. And wouldn't you know it, the house directly across the street from mine had just gone up for sale. Not just any house, mind you, but the most beautiful 2-story colonial with a perfect view of my front yard and living room window. The asking price was $350,000, which was steep, but not impossible. More importantly, it was being sold by an elderly couple who were moving to Florida to be closer to their grandchildren. They were motivated sellers who just wanted a quick, clean transaction with a cash buyer. I made an offer that very day. Full asking price, all cash, closing in 2 weeks. The real estate agent thought I was either crazy or rich, and honey,
I was a little bit of both. But the real genius of my plan wasn't just buying the house across the street, it was what I was planning to do once I owned it. See, Marcus and Jennifer thought they had all the power because they'd manipulated me into signing over half of my house. But what they didn't know was that I'd been keeping careful records of every single thing they'd done to me. Every night I was forced to sleep in the garage. Every meal I was excluded from. Every time Bruno got better treatment than I did. It was all written down in my journal with dates and times. More importantly, I'd started recording conversations on my phone. Arizona is a one-party consent state, which means you can record any conversation you're a part of without telling the other person. For 3 weeks, I'd been documenting every cruel comment, every dismissive remark, every instance of them prioritizing that dog over my basic human needs. I had enough evidence to file charges for elder abuse, fraud, and emotional distress. But I had even better idea. 2 weeks later, on a beautiful Thursday morning in December, I closed on the house across the street. I'd arranged for a moving company to come the very same day to transport all my belongings from the garage to my new home. But I didn't tell Marcus and Jennifer what I was doing. I wanted it to be a surprise. I woke up at 6 in the morning and started quietly packing my things. Everything I owned fit into about 10 boxes: clothes, photo albums, a few pieces of jewelry, and the quilt my mother had made. It was depressing how little I'd been allowed to keep in my own home, but it was liberating to realize how little I actually needed. The moving truck arrived at 9 a.m. sharp, and that's when Marcus came stumbling out of my former master bedroom in his underwear. "Mom, what's going on?" he asked, rubbing his eyes and looking confused. "I'm moving," I said simply, directing the movers to load my boxes. "Moving where? We didn't agree to any nursing home." Y'all, I could see Jennifer peeking out from behind the curtains, probably trying to figure out what was happening. Bruno was barking his head off at all the commotion, which was just perfect for what came next. "I'm not going to a nursing home, sweetheart." And honey, my voice was pure satisfaction. "I'm moving across the street." I pointed to the beautiful Colonial where another moving truck was unloading furniture I bought with Harold's life insurance money. A gorgeous new sectional sofa, a dining room set that put my old one to shame, and the most beautiful king-size bed you ever did see. Marcus followed my gaze, and his mouth fell open like he'd been slapped. "You bought the Henderson place?" "Cash offer," I confirmed. "Closed yesterday. And sweetie, you should see the view I have from this house from my new living room window. I can see everything that goes on in here." That's when Jennifer came flying out of the house like her hair was on fire, wearing a robe bath and fuzzy slippers, looking about as undignified as I'd ever seen her. "You can't just move across the street," she shrieked. That's stalking or something." "It's called buying a house in America," I replied calmly. "Last I checked, that was still legal." But the best part, the absolutely delicious part, was what happened next. As the moving truck pulled away with the last of my belongings, a black sedan pulled up in front of the house. 2 people got out, a woman in a business suit carrying a briefcase, and a man with a camera and official-looking paperwork. "Mrs. Dorothy Martinez," the woman called out. "That's me," I answered from my position on the porch steps. "I'm Sarah Chin from Adult Protective Services, and this is Officer Rodriguez from the Phoenix Police Department. We're here to investigate a report of elder abuse and financial exploitation." Y'all, if you could have seen the look on Marcus and Jennifer's faces, you'd have laughed until your sides hurt. Jennifer went white as a sheet, and Marcus started stuttering like a broken record. "There's been some mistake," Jennifer said, her voice getting higher and more panicked. "We take wonderful care of Dorothy." "Ma'am, we're going to need to interview all parties separately, and we'll need to document the living conditions that were reported to us." I watched from across the street as they spent the next 4 hours photographing the garage where I'd been forced to sleep, interviewing neighbors who'd seen me carrying belongings in and out of the garage, and reviewing the financial documents that showed how Marcus had tricked me into signing over half of my house. But the absolute best part came when they tried to interview Bruno as evidence of how the household budget was being managed. That spoiled dog had his own bedroom, a custom-made elevated feeding station, and about $500 worth of toys and accessories. Meanwhile, my former bedroom in the garage contained a deflated air mattress and a pile of old blankets. The contrast was so stark, so obviously abusive, that even Jennifer couldn't explain it away. 3 days later, Marcus came knocking on my new front door, looking like he hadn't slept since the investigation started. "Mom, can we talk?" he asked. And honey, his voice was small and ashamed, like when he was 8 years old and had broken something valuable. I invited him in and served him coffee in my beautiful new kitchen. The morning sun was streaming through windows that actually belonged to me, and I was wearing a comfortable robe instead of the same clothes I'd been sleeping in for months. "The police said you're not pressing charges," he said quietly. "That's right," I confirmed. "And APS said they're closing the investigation." Also correct. He looked confused and relieved at the same time. "I don't understand. After everything that happened, why aren't you trying to get revenge?" Y'all, I set down my coffee cup and looked at my son, really looked at him for the first time in months. He looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes, stress lines around his mouth, and the kind of exhaustion that comes from knowing you've done something unforgivable. "Marcus," I said softly, "do you remember when you were 12 years old and you broke my mother's vase playing baseball in the house?" He nodded, probably wondering where this was going. "You were so scared to tell me and your daddy what happened that you hid the pieces under your bed for 3 weeks. But the guilt ate at you until you finally confessed, crying so hard you could barely get the words out." "I remember," he whispered. "Do you remember what I told you then?" He shook his head. "I told you that the vase was just a thing, but your honesty was worth everything, and that no matter what you did, no matter how badly you messed up, you would always be my son, and I would always love you." Tears were starting to roll down his cheeks, and honey, my own voice was getting thick with emotion. "I still love you, Marcus, but loving someone doesn't mean letting them treat you terribly. And it doesn't mean enabling them to continue making bad choices." "I'm so sorry, Mom," he said, and his voice broke right in half. "I don't know what happened to me. Jennifer kept saying we needed to establish boundaries and that you were too dependent, and I lost myself somewhere." "You lost your way," I agreed. "But that doesn't mean you can't find it again." We talked for 2 hours that morning. Really talked, like we hadn't done since before Harold died. Marcus told me how Jennifer had been pressuring him to get control of my assets so they could use the house as collateral for her business ventures. He admitted that the whole Bruno situation had gotten completely out of hand. But Jennifer had convinced him that challenging her about the dog would damage their marriage. He also told me something that broke my heart. Jennifer had been telling him that I was showing signs of dementia, and letting me make my own decisions was dangerous. She'd convinced him that taking control of my life was actually protecting me from myself. "But Mom," he said, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand, "sitting here talking to you now, You're sharper than you've ever been. There's nothing wrong with your mind. How did I let her convince me otherwise? Because grief makes people vulnerable, and some folks are real good at taking advantage of that vulnerability. The hardest part of our conversation came when Marcus asked if there was any way he could make things right, if there was any way I could ever forgive him and trust him again. Forgiveness isn't something you earn, sweetie. It's something I choose to give. And I choose to forgive you because holding on to anger would only hurt me in the end. But trust, that has to be rebuilt brick by brick, day by day. And it starts with you making some very difficult decisions about your life and your marriage. Marcus was quiet for a long time, staring out my window at the house across the street. The house that used to be my home and now was his prison. "She's already talking about getting another dog," he said finally. "A puppy this time so Bruno can have a companion." Y'all, I couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. 2 dogs ruling your house while you sleep on whatever furniture they don't want? It sounds crazy when you say it like that. It sounds crazy because it is crazy, honey. Marcus left that day with a lot to think about. I didn't push him to make any immediate decisions about Jennifer or Bruno or the house. I just told him that whenever he was ready to have a relationship based on mutual respect and love, I'd be right across the street. Over the next few weeks, I settled into my new life with a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. My house was beautiful, decorated exactly the way I wanted it, with no one telling me where I could or couldn't sit. I could watch television at any volume I wanted, cook whatever food I craved, and have visitors whenever I pleased. I joined a book club at the local library and made friends with other women my age who'd gone through similar struggles with their families. I started volunteering at a domestic violence shelter, helping other older women recognize the signs of emotional abuse and financial exploitation. But the most satisfying part of my new life was the view from my living room window. Every morning, I could see Jennifer struggling to control Bruno, who had apparently decided that his kingdom needed expanding. The dog had destroyed most of their furniture, chewed through the drywall in 2 rooms, and was making their lives absolutely miserable. I watched Marcus leave for work looking more exhausted every day, and I could see Jennifer pacing around the house like a caged animal. Without me there as a target for their frustration, they'd started taking it out on each other. The breaking point came on a cold February morning about 2 months after I'd moved. I was sitting in my beautiful kitchen, drinking coffee and reading the newspaper, when I heard the most god-awful commotion coming from across the street. Bruno had apparently gotten into the kitchen garbage and had spread trash all over the house. But instead of just making the mess, he'd eaten something that disagreed with him, and Jennifer was shrieking about the smell and the damage. I watched through my window as Marcus tried to clean up the mess while Jennifer screamed at both him and the dog. The argument escalated until Jennifer was throwing things and Marcus was shouting back. Finally, Marcus just threw down the cleaning supplies and walked out of the house. 20 minutes later, there was a knock on my door. Marcus was standing on my porch with a suitcase in one hand and divorce papers in the other. "Mom, I think I'm ready to start rebuilding that trust." Y'all, I invited that boy inside and made him the biggest breakfast he'd had eaten in months. We talked about his marriage, his mistakes, and his plans for the future. Most importantly, we talked about what kind of relationship we wanted to have going forward. Marcus filed for divorce the following week and moved into a small apartment across town. He kept his half of the house on Maple Street, but he couldn't afford the mortgage payments without Jennifer's income, so he decided to sell. When the house went on the market, I made him an offer he couldn't resist. I bought his half of the property for exactly what he'd paid into it, plus enough to cover his legal fees and security deposit on his apartment. 6 months after I'd moved across the street in dramatic fashion, I found myself moving back to my original home, but this time I was moving back as the sole owner, with my dignity intact and my relationship with my son slowly healing.
Jennifer moved back to California with Bruno, who apparently didn't travel well and made the entire cross-country trip miserable for everyone involved. I heard through the neighborhood gossip that she'd tried to take him on an airplane, but he'd been kicked off the flight for aggressive behavior. The house needed a complete renovation after months of dog damage, but Harold's life insurance money and the sale of my beautiful colonial across the street gave me plenty of resources to make it better than it had ever been. I kept the sectional sofa that Bruno had claimed as his throne, but I had it professionally cleaned and reupholstered in the most beautiful fabric you ever did see. Every time I sit on it now, I remember not the months of sleeping in the garage, but the morning I chose to take my power back. Marcus comes for dinner every Sunday now, and we're slowly rebuilding our relationship, one conversation at a time. He's dating a lovely woman named Carol who treats me with respect and kindness, and who thinks the whole Bruno saga is as ridiculous as I do. We laugh about it now, but honey, it wasn't funny at the time. What happened to me was elder abuse, plain and simple, and it happens to thousands of older Americans every single day. Family members who see dollar signs instead of human dignity, who think age makes people disposable or less deserving of basic respect. But the most important thing I learned from this whole experience is that you're never too old to stand up for yourself. You're never too old to demand better treatment. And you're never too old to completely change your life if the one you're living isn't serving you. Some people thought I was crazy for buying that house across the street just to prove a point. But honey, it wasn't about proving a point. It was about proving to myself that I still had choices, still had power, and still had the right to live with dignity in my own home. The garage, where I was forced to sleep for all those months, is now my craft room, filled with art supplies and comfortable furniture. Every morning when I walk through there to get to my beautiful kitchen, I remember the woman who was willing to accept crumbs of respect and leftover scraps of love. That woman is gone, and in her place is someone who knows her worth and won't settle for anything less than she deserves. Y'all, if you're listening to this story and recognizing yourself in it, if you're being mistreated by family members who think your age makes you powerless, I want you to know that you have options, you have rights, and you have more strength than you know. Don't let anyone convince you that you should be grateful for scraps when you deserve a seat at the table. Don't let anyone tell you that keeping peace is more important than keeping your dignity. And most importantly, don't let anyone make you feel like you're asking for too much when all you want is basic human respect. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to stop enabling their worst behavior. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from people who consistently choose to hurt you, even when those people share your DNA. My story had a happy ending because I was privileged enough to have resources and options that not everyone has. But the principles apply no matter what your situation looks like. Knowledge is power. Documentation is protection. And sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to participate in your own mistreatment. I still live in the house Harold built, the house where we raised Marcus and celebrated 47 years of marriage. But now it's truly my sanctuary again, filled with love and laughter and the occasional visit from grandchildren who are finally allowed to come see their grandmother without a dog's permission. And every evening when I settle into my beautiful sectional sofa to watch the sunset through windows that belong completely to me, I smile and remember the morning I decided that sleeping in the garage while a dog got the couch was not the end of my story. It was just the beginning of my comeback. Thank you for listening to my story, sweethearts. Remember to subscribe if this resonated with you, and tell me in the comments, what's the boldest thing you've ever done to take your power back? I read every single comment, and I love hearing about other warriors who refuse to go quietly into that good night. Until next time, this is Dorothy from Phoenix, reminding you that it's never too late to choose yourself. Y'all take care now.